So you're preparing your client to talk to me, but then what if I'm just not good enough to assess that you've prepared them right? How should I be
hmm
thinking so that I hear what they are telling you and then I feel good that I'm hiring somebody that thinks strategically and has leadership presence?
So, one of the most important strategies that I tell all of my clients and I told all of my candidates over all of these years is to ask good questions. Before the interview even starts, ask them, what are you looking for in this hire?
Welcome to the Vision to Reality podcast. I'm your host, Curtis L. Jenkins, and in each episode, I speak with industry experts, thought leaders, and innovators to break down the strategies, techniques, and methods that turn their ideas into reality. Whether your vision is to scale your business, build and lead a winning team, prepare for your next big career move, this podcast is for you. Let's get started and bring your vision to reality. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vision to Reality podcast, where we discuss topics with visionaries, people who have turned their personal and professional visions into reality. I'm your host, Curtis Jenkins, and today we have a special episode lined up. We're talking about from vague vision to executive role, designing the career you actually want. And my special guest, Jennifer Speciale, is here to share her talents and insights on the subject. Jennifer is an executive leadership coach and former executive recruiter who helps senior design, tech, and consulting leaders turn vague career visions into concrete executive roles and measurable business impact. After nearly 2 decades hiring and coaching leaders at companies like Amazon, McKinsey, Google, and Bloomberg, she now uses that insider perspective to help ambitious executives articulate their value, design the roles they want, and confidently step into their next chapter. Welcome, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Curtis.
I was so excited to finally get you on the show. Your profile is so amazing. I would see you on LinkedIn, and you have such valuable insights that you provide to folks. Tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and why you do it.
Okay, so I was an executive recruiter for many, many years, almost 2 decades, and spent a lot of time in the tech startup scene in Manhattan. I was employee number 86 at Indeed.com and helped them get into international markets. I was at Google and started the first design team outside of Mountain View. Then I went to McKinsey and built the whole design practice from the ground up, and eventually Amazon. I was on this executive design recruiting team appointed by Jeff Bezos, and just at a certain point felt so underutilized. I was thinking, how am I at this place with 1.4 million employees and I feel underutilized? Like, what's wrong with me? And, I've spent my entire career helping organizations understand people like design, user experience, and product designers, and helped candidates to translate their experience so that hiring managers could understand where the heck design fits into business strategy or, the overarching business plan. But it wasn't until I was at Amazon where I had these brilliant candidates with patents and degrees from the best universities interview with similar Amazonians. And the first 6 weeks of my training for that team was to silently observe other people's recruiting processes. I was dreading it, full disclosure, and realized what I learned was invaluable. It has shaped my present and my future, which was people still needed translation and help to articulate and be their best selves in something as nerve-wracking as an interview process. And so these super brilliant people kept saying time and again, I never would have gotten this role without your coaching. I never would have gotten this offer without you coaching me. And I'm like, of course you would have. You're brilliant. You have all these degrees. And they're like, no, trust me, I never would have. I didn't get it. I didn't know how to present myself. And I kept thinking, but that's my favorite part of the role. Maybe there's a way I can just do my favorite part of my job as my whole job. And foolishly, I somehow thought that I invented this profession. And when I got out into the world, I was like, there's a coach for everything. Pinky toes, you name it, there is a coach for everything. So I was like, okay, how do I compete in this? Like everybody, you just find a way. You stay close to what gets you out of bed and what makes you happy. And I really, truly feel like I'm finally doing my life's work. I loved recruiting. I loved building organizations. I loved traveling the world, but I really feel like I'm finally moving the needle on what matters, at
Okay.
least for me.
Yeah, so you had that aha moment that brought you to where you are. And I've used the play on your name in terms of speciality and special. I've used it a few times.
Oh, yeah. At least
And
you
I,
didn't
and I,
ask me if my middle name was Thinks I'm So, because it's not.
okay, I'm glad that that was already used because I wasn't going there. But I think one of the things that resonated with me was when you decided, or when you actually learned your pivotal moment was discovering that you were special, right? And here's what I mean by that. I used to think everybody can do what I do. Sure, you can do it. You can do it, because you're doing it. But people are feeding back to you that you are special, and that's why they come to you, right? So, what I want to know is prior to that, because you talked about the present and the future. Let's talk about the past. Who was Jennifer that had these special traits, values, upbringing, things about her that actually brought her to that point when she was working with Jeff Bezos and others?
Well, it definitely wasn't some of my elementary school teachers who always gave me bad conduct grades for talking too much. I would love to go back to them someday and tell them I'm paid to talk now.
Check me out. Check me out now, right?
Yes. Hate to say I told you so. Yeah, it's for me, I don't really feel like I'm special. I feel like I'm doing what I love. I truly love. I value my clients and the things that they share with me so deeply. It's, a big leap of faith to confide your work frustrations as a CEO or your insecurities as the global CIO, or even somebody who is very worthy of being promoted to VP and you've been passed over maybe not once but twice. That those are very vulnerable moments. We spend more time working than we may want to admit, but it is a part of our life, even if we're not Europeans working to live instead of living to work or whatever that thing is that Americans do that Europeans don't. You still have to work and you have to spend a lot of time doing it and you want to do it well. I think that the human motivation is labor and working and getting a sense of satisfaction from that. So having somebody to help you unlock that is very rewarding that I can help people to unlock that. I don't know if I
Okay.
answered your question.
Well, I'm going to go a little bit deeper. So, you said in elementary school, right? You had a trait about you that actually serves you now today, right? And so that's, that does answer part of my question. But I don't think you grew up saying, I wanted to be a coach designing executives' lives. What did you want to
No.
be originally? And then how did you make that pivot?
That's such a good question. Originally, I think I always wanted to be a doctor for years and years. I wanted to ask good questions and help people really figure out what was making them sick. And that kind of migrated into psychiatry. And so I studied neuroscience in undergraduate. I was just walking the halls of the neuroscience department and found somebody who would, give me the time of day, which was not easy. And it turned out to be the chairman of the neuroscience department at Indiana University, go Hoosiers. And I was so lucky because he gave me a chance. And I did a lot of research for drugs to help schizophrenics, people with schizophrenia, to lead a well adjusted life. But that lab work helped me realize that I needed to be farther along on the spectrum of a more social profession and not just behind the scenes. And so after undergraduate, I dropped neuroscience and I went to business school and did a couple of business degrees. And, I really fell into recruiting. It was a total accident. I think most recruiters will tell you they did not go to school to be a recruiter, but I was working my third or fourth job. I had a lot of jobs out of undergrad and still eating ramen noodles. And a girl found me at one of my clothing store jobs
Mhm.
and said, I've been watching you. You would be an excellent recruiter. And I was like for the military? I had no idea. I'd never heard of it. And she said, "No, I'm a tech recruiter and you would be great at it." And I said, "Well, where?" She was buying all these clothes because she was celebrating her new job. And I said, "Where are you leaving?" Because her one job had to pay more than my four. And so she set me up with her network. I had 6 interviews and 6 offers. I still had no idea what I was interviewing for, but I found my way and I fell in love with the profession. And yeah, I don't think I was super directed. I think it was good fortune.
Yeah, well, luck plays a big role, right? But what is luck? Preparation and opportunity coming together, right? So
Right.
you were
I
prepared.
totally agree.
Okay. All right. And so I took a look at your website and I saw all these amazing testimonials. And one of the things that I see that's in common is what they talk about your unique strategies in helping people. What is it that you believe is unique that separates you from the myriad of coaches that we talked about earlier? And why are your clients so happy with you with that?
I really believe in teaching people to fish. I don't want to just give fish. I want people to learn from me and build the confidence that it takes to find a new role, build their new network. When I say build your new tribe and become very unapologetic about what you want, because as soon as you become very unapologetic about what you really want, that you will not take the last industry that you were in just because you need to, or take a pay cut because you think you should. When you become unapologetic about what you want, even if you fit in the shaded area of multiple Venn diagrams, everything starts to coalesce around you. You start to find your tribe. You start to build your right tribe. You design your artifacts so that they speak to your tribe, and you start to realize your tribe has been waiting for you. It's just how you get to them. And once everything is aligned in you and you start to reach out, and sometimes it takes some A/B testing, and that's okay. Everything is about a prototype, and prototyping is good, it's healthy, but in order to really find what you want and design your role and build your tribe, it's the prototyping that gives you butterflies, energizes you if you've been impacted by a layoff. I always tell my clients, just because you've been impacted by a layoff, that does not erase or eliminate any of the accomplishments that you've had. It just means now you're going to make a decision about a pivot maybe before you planned. That's okay. You live once, just do it well.
Yeah. Being unapologetic about what you want. I understand that. It's the hardest thing that I find in working with people. What do you do that helps them cross that bridge and really feel confident about what they want so that they can actually articulate it? Because I find that when I'm talking to people, they're telling me what they want, but they're not articulating in a way that I can actually know exactly what to do to give them what they want. So what do you
Okay.
do?
You mean to be able to articulate that to different audiences so
Yeah,
that they can be
yeah,
understood?
let me say it. Let's just role play. So I called you and I need your help. I'm trying to find my next role. I'm trying to design my next career, but I am struggling with exactly what I want. I had a situation earlier in my career where I told a gentleman that I flew all the way to North Carolina with that I met in a restaurant and telling him that I was in mergers and acquisitions, that I wanted to move from IT to working in the business. And that gentleman asked me several times, what did I want? And I said, I want to work in the business. And then he stopped taking my calls. And it took me a while to figure out I could not tell him what I wanted. I was too broad. I didn't
Mm,
understand what I wanted. I couldn't articulate it. And then I find other people that I talk to do that often, and I got to try to
yeah.
pull it out. Tell me about your process. How do you deal with that? Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Learning, a platform I recommend for leaders who want to keep investing in the skills that turn their ideas into real impact. On this show, we talk about execution, and execution becomes a lot easier when you're learning from experts who've actually done the work. LinkedIn Learning offers thousands of courses across leadership, communication, project management, AI, and more, designed to help you stay sharp and competitive. If you're serious about growing your career, leading stronger teams, or building your business, LinkedIn Learning gives you an edge. To explore it for yourself, just use the link in the show notes. Once again, the link is waiting for you in the show notes. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, I invest a lot of time in the front end getting to know a person, not their whole resume, not what they did 20 years ago, but why they made certain job changes, what they were looking for, what they're still looking for, and what it is that's missing in their current role, or what kinds of people, what kinds of environment. And, a picture starts to form in my mind, and I start to realize kind of the common thread, because the common thread is there, even if they have disparate industries or, you know, a degree that doesn't match what they're currently doing. I can always kind of make the story. I can look at a person's LinkedIn profile and it takes shape for me. And I'll start with a hypothesis, I confirm it with them, and then get the client to tell me what they want to do more of. And then the story starts to take shape. And I tell them, you need to emphasize this in your background and talk about doing more of this, not just the confessional of everything that you have already done. Because the confessional doesn't serve you. That's the past. You need to talk about what you want to do more of going forward.
So that's the want, right? How about the I am struggling with articulating my value? How do you
Yeah.
handle that?
That is really, really hard for people, and that is going deep on specific parts of their career that they're very proud of, what role they played, and the kinds of different types of judgment that they exercised in certain situations. So if they had somebody on their team that was failing, how did you deal with that? What kinds of solutions did you come up with? And you want to come up with things more than we had more one-on-ones. Or if a person solved a particularly unique problem. I have a client that was working across a ton of different silos that had built up over time. The organization didn't even know there were all those silos. So I said, well, how did you find that problem? And then what did you do to remedy that? So being able to articulate some significant successes, but also understand things that were not successful and why they weren't successful. Because there's a lot of learning that could happen in what could be called failure. And then tying that all together and creating a unique vision that says, this is your person that's the rock, or this is the person that's the visionary, or this is the calm in the storm, or this is who you can always go to for a more innovative strategy. You start to realize what is unique and different. And I tell people, how would this project have gone if you'd been hit by a bus and in the hospital and not available? How would your team have accomplished these goals? And they can always say they would not have. Okay, great. Why? Why was it different? Because you were there. And then a couple of those stories, and enough of those stories, you start to see the pattern and realize who you are in that one shaded area, and why you are indeed very unique, and what makes what you do unique.
Okay. I'm sure people love that when they finally get on the other side of it because
Yeah,
especially those that's worked for a long period of time and had to look for a job again, they're like fish out of water trying to figure navigating the job search because they've always had a job. Is
that's
your
true.
clientele specific and special, like, or do you niche? I'll give you an example. Are you specifically focused on executives or do you also help mid-level managers?
Kind of depends on the definition of mid-level, because every organization's a different size, but
I
my
see.
client base is usually, no less than 15 years of experience, between 15 and 20, 25, sometimes 30 years of experience.
So it's more about the amount of experience. And I was wondering if it was just C level or maybe C level and maybe their direct reports, but no further down than that. Maybe director and above. I don't know. I was just trying to
Yeah, I would say
figure that out.
VP, director. I do have clients that are striving to get to VP level, get to that next level.
Okay. Is
Um,
there a difference in how you deal with each?
yes, my C-suite clients really, it's more about storytelling and the kinds of judgment that they can exhibit, and making sure what they're articulating is interesting to boards, and very often getting boards to align on goals and a lot of time my C-level clients really need somebody to vent to, somebody to talk about the politics, the difficulties, the challenges, the political landscape and troubles. And they say things like, you're the only person I can tell this stuff to. Like, my spouse doesn't want to hear it. I'm not going to tell my leader these kinds of things. And so sometimes the C-level needs the opportunity to unwind intellectually and increase their bandwidth. Then, sort of people trying to get to a promotion like a VP or director, EVP, whatever, get to that next level. It's really about the storytelling, executive storytelling. How do you articulate in a very structured way your contributions, roles that you've had, roles that you've played, and things that you want to do more of, the impact that you created, and making sure that you can really articulate that in a way that any audience can understand, whether it's HR, finance, technology, design. You want to be able to, basically tell your grandmother what your metrics mean and
Mhm.
why they're significant.
I like that. Bill, I always say, tell me like I'm a 6-year-old, but I get it. It's like, tell your grandmother so that she gets it. My grandmother, when I worked for the phone company, she had, you remember those princess phones that had the little swiggly cords? So she bought that cord.
Like a landline?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And she bought it and she called me over to her house to put it together because I worked for the phone company and I was in IT. So
But she knew you could do it.
she knew I could do it, but she didn't really know what I did for a living. She
Yeah.
just know I worked at the phone company and she had a phone.
Yeah.
So I just saw one of your recent posts. Like I told you before, just loved what people say to you and what you say to the world. But you got
Thank
to
you.
explain this to me. Being easy to work with is costing you 100K at a VP level. You got to explain what that is because, I feel like I'm an easy person to work with. And I just saw that I'm losing 100K. What's going on?
Well, it's the idea that if you're the person, and excuse my language, but if you're the person that gets shit done and you're the person that everybody piles things on,
Yeah.
you're the person that works every weekend to do the deck that nobody wanted to do. Everybody
Mm,
sent you their slides, their contribution. You're the one that always jumps in. You're the go-to person. That's good for a while. But when you believe that your work should speak for itself and you're ready for the next level and you just keep getting passed over because you're the nice one, you're the one that jumps in and does everybody's grunt work, it's the old adage, everything that got you here won't get you there. So your hard work may have been noticed to get you to that point, but if you stay in the weeds and you stay, I hate to say it, but acquiescent, that's going to cost you. You will not move up. And I work with so many amazing clients, brilliant people with the right degrees, the right intelligence, the right everything. And one of my clients told me 2 days ago, she had to sit on her hands and binge watch things on Netflix to force herself not to take everybody's half baked deck and put it all together and make it right for the presentation that was happening Monday. And you know what? Her leader got everybody on a team call Sunday night. Everybody jumped in and did their part. It was it was an hour-long meeting. The presentation on Monday went fine. The client was thrilled. Her leader was thrilled. And she didn't burn her whole weekend ignoring her kids, doing what she did every other weekend. And so it is a skill, and very often a skill that a person has to learn and then exercise and work on, particularly if you're used to being a giver, an empathetic person, the one that never wants to say no. It is a skill to say no or to just be quiet, not be available. If you find that everybody's hogging your time and stealing your meeting space and making you do things that aren't strategic for you in the direction that you want to go, it's time to become a whole lot less available.
okay. So much to unpack there. All right. So first, is the 100K loss considered the fact that if you took your hours and your salary and did an hour by salary by you working so much extra, you would see that you're making like what somebody at McDonald's would make because you're spending so much time and that value is going down? Or are you saying that you won't get promoted and get that extra bump in your salary because you're so accessible and you're just too nice, or is a combination of both? Tell me what you're saying with the 100K.
Yeah, I think it could be either of those. It could be both of those. It doesn't mean that you have to not be nice. You have to be aggressive and a
Yeah.
jerk and demanding or whatever, any of those opposite things of nice. It just means you need to be strategic and be clear on your goals, not just with yourself, but with your leader and with your peers and your leader's leader. Because to think that your work will just be rewarded and noticed is a fallacy. You've got to do the job that you want and be the person that you want to be, and then ask for it. You don't get what you don't ask for. And it is really hard if nobody knows your goals and you're busy being nice. That's called waiting for Godot. You're waiting for something that may never happen. Your skills degrade, your ability degrades, your brand degrades. You're no longer seen as strong and capable and talented as you were when you first got into the role that you're in. You have degraded over time. It's really hard to get out of that because leadership loves you. You know, who doesn't love a great big endless desk to pile things on? It's very convenient and it's completely dangerous for you.
That love for me is so validating, and I work so
Uh,
hard, and they don't see me. I don't know how to set boundaries or say no.
right.
What do I do? Hey, I just wanted to take a quick break to say thank you for tuning in to the Vision to Reality podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to level up your business or career, I've got some great resources for you. To turn your business vision into reality, my book, Vision to Reality, Start Working, Start Living, is available now and filled with strategies to help you bring your goals to life. Plus, the companion Vision to Reality digital workbook is the perfect tool to guide you step by step through the process. You can grab both at curtisljenkins.com. And if you're preparing for your next job search, check out my book, The Only Job Search Book You Will Ever Need. This book uses proven marketing strategies that have been used for over 60 years to help you rise above competition to land your dream job. You can grab your copy at curtisljenkins.com. And I have great news. This book will be updated with a new version that includes recent impacts on the job search process, such as remote work, AI, government policy changes, and much more. Thanks again for listening. Now let's get back to the conversation.
You panic. No, you don't panic. You become very clear about what you want. Again, it's more of unapologetic. And it
Yep.
doesn't mean aggressive.
Right.
It doesn't mean hostile.
Yeah.
It just means, a lot of times setting boundaries with one of your leaders that's piling everything on you is forcing them to prioritize. So the first thing that starts to mitigate that kind of behavior from coworkers or leaders is get a whole lot of transparency there. Lots and lots of dashboards or weekly reports illuminating just how much you're actually doing. Because a lot of times people just aren't aware. So when you illuminate all that you're actually doing that is probably outside your scope, if the leader is kind of abusive, which is a harsh word, but is abusive of your time, then you have to force them to say, which of these is a priority? Because I don't have the bandwidth to do all of it. You don't have to say the words, I don't have the bandwidth to do all of it. It's implied. Like there is not enough bandwidth to do all of this in one
Right.
person. We can hire somebody else or we can delegate some of these. Or maybe you should be the one delegating those. Maybe there's a junior person on your team. And if it hurts you because you like being liked and you like to have the recognition, then offload some of those things into a more junior person that would probably love the opportunity to shine. And then, of course, give them the credit and bring them, lift them up. That will only make you look better. So it is creating a virtuous cycle. It's a great way to help women to get into higher roles, particularly.
Yeah. I think the biggest lesson here, and actually, when I write my feelings, I got a little notebook that I write my feelings. I was on vacation, and this was a previous vacation because my last vacation, when you said teaching somebody how to fish, I was fly fishing in New Zealand.
Oh, wow.
So, and there's so many leadership
Love New
lessons in
Zealand.
there, right?
Yeah.
But it was another vacation, I had joined a meeting. And then I got a call right after that meeting saying, well, since you're like basically not vacationing, let me dump some things on you, right? I mean, of course, I'm paraphrasing. And I wrote to myself, Curtis, you train people how to treat you. Now, I knew that fundamentally, but I had to say that. And then I thought, okay, people need to know that everything that you're talking about, using the right words, setting the boundaries, if you don't, you're really training people to treat you the way that they do. So when you start asking yourself the question, why do people treat me that way? You kind of set the stage for it.
You have taught them how to treat you.
Exactly. Exactly. And this whole thing about a meritocracy, because people see you do hard work, it doesn't work in the corporate world. And like you said, what got you here doesn't get you there.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about your practice. And I'm going to refer to your three steps in your program, or I'm sorry, your diagnostic coaching, executive branding, transition planning, and leadership agility. Why are they important? Why did you choose those? And give us a flavor of what you do in that space.
So, 20 years of recruiting people at all levels, you start to see patterns, right? Humans, the world over, different cultures, different ages, different skill sets, different industries, we're all still humans trying to work and do well at work. And there are patterns. And the big three patterns are not being understood, not which can translate into not having a well-written LinkedIn profile, which, there are a number of double clicks on that, but not being understood and not having a strategy is the other big pillar, not knowing how to find your tribe, find your way to a promotion. And then the third big one is missing opportunities, continually being passed over, not getting those promotions or not being able to land the role that you want. Maybe you're landing interviews, but not landing the role. So those are the three big areas that I focus on. And it's all about those things that you articulated.
Okay. All right. And so you're getting people ready for jobs. I
Yes.
am, or their next opportunity. Sometimes jobs just doesn't sound right when you're at that executive level, but I'm a hiring manager, right? And so I'm on the other side of this, and you're preparing somebody to talk to me. And so what should I listen in for that says I can assess how this person thinks strategically, and do they bring leadership presence?
You, as the hiring manager, how would you perceive that in one of my clients?
Yeah, so you're preparing your client to talk to me. But then what if I'm just not good enough to assess that you've prepared them right? How should I be
Hmm.
thinking so that I hear what they are telling you and then I feel good that I'm hiring somebody that thinks strategically and has leadership presence?
Yeah. So, one of the most important strategies that I tell all of my clients and I told all of my candidates over all of these years is to ask good questions. Before the interview even starts, ask them, what are you looking for in this hire? Forget about the job description. That was written by somebody else. The hiring manager may not even know what it says. At big companies, they're written to a code. Each block of that job
Hmm.
description is meeting some legal requirement. It may be a template, it could be a startup and it was really written truly by the hiring manager, but it's very unlikely. I think we pore over job descriptions looking for clues that usually don't exist. So, the first thing that I tell all of my clients going into any interview is to start by saying, before we get started, I want to hear from you. What do you really need in this hire? And to ask every single interviewer that, because what I know from telling my candidates that over the years, even with multiple interviewers and hiring managers, they may all have a different answer. Each interviewer might say, I know what the job description says, but I'm going to tell you what we really need. I'm so glad you asked. If you make the assumption that the majority of people are not good interviewers, have not had formal training, hire from the gut, which is bad because it's, riddled with bias. If you just ask the person point blank, what is it that's really needed? They'll tell you point blank, whether it's in the job description or not. And then you, as a candidate, if your background fits, which it should be because you're sitting in that interview seat, you can tell them very specifically how your background relates to what they need. You don't have to start with your first job in 1999 and take it up to present. You don't have to answer, tell me about yourself. You may have to, but that's such a terrible question. You don't have to wonder what they want to hear. What aspect do they want to hear? You ask directly, ask the question. And then once they're talking, anything else that comes from that, you can answer accurately. And that's the secret sauce. And
That
now you owe me a
is,
lot of money, Curtis.
so let me explain with me with hiring. First of all, here's what I heard. And I do this. If I was interviewing, I would do exactly that. What you just said. The first thing that resonated with me is when you ask this question, you take over control of the interview.
Yes.
What happens most times is you're just sitting there with the deer in the headlight look, and you're just trying to you just want to impress who's in front of you, but the best way to do it is ask them what impresses them, right? With
Yeah.
That's in the underlying piece of that, right? So I
Yeah.
love that beginning. I got goosebumps when you said that. The second part of that was you said good questions. I'll tell you a story, little secret. I just recently interviewed somebody, and everybody that I was on a panel with, my colleagues, know this about me. We were so enamored with this candidate. But I always add at the end of the meeting an opportunity for the candidate to interview us, right? 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how the interview's flowing. And if a person, and he started off giving a summary of the interview, which I thought was good, but then he had me scared that he was going to end it with, I don't have any questions, or not saying something like, well, I had this question, and this question, but throughout the course of the conversation, you answered those questions. My number one thing is intellectual curiosity, because you have to solve problems. I could love you to death, and if you leave that interview not asking me any questions, I will immediately cut it off.
Yeah. It's
I'm
over.
done. It's over. And so my colleagues in the background were saying, please ask a question, please ask a question, please ask a
Yeah.
question. So I love your approach. I love your approach about taking control of the interview, asking questions so that they really tell you the answers. Everybody tells you the answers when you ask the right questions.
Yeah. Interviewers are rarely interviewed. And as a candidate, you're nervous. If you've been impacted by a layoff, you feel vulnerable,
Yep.
needy, maybe desperate. You don't want to admit those things, but you feel all those
Yeah.
things.
They're real human
And so
feelings.
you're human. And I tell my clients, I never want you to feel vulnerable. I never want you to feel that. I never want you to feel those things. And I want you to feel strong and capable. If you find out that what they really want in this hire is something that you are not, you need to feel relief because that's a save.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do not need to feel, how will I explain X skill that I don't have? If you have something that is adjacent, that's okay too. Because I always told my hiring managers, we don't want to hire the square peg for the square hole. You want to hire the rhombus because the rhombus, interest and ambition will always pull you over anything that you're lacking. That's a better hire. The
Yeah.
rhombus is the fit. And in
Yeah.
all my years of recruiting, I never lost people. I always had people that stayed minimum 2 years, but many, many years.
Yeah.
I have so many people that I hired that stayed for years and years. And I took a lot of pride in that because I felt like if I'm going to put my name on this company and recruit you to work for my company, it better be a good match on both
Yes.
sides. I don't
That's
want the
right.
company to lose. I don't want the candidate to lose.
Yeah.
And I do the same thing with my clients. I do retrospectives every year. I talk to clients to find out, how's it going? Do you like the role you're in? Did the strategy work for you? Do you feel good about it? And thankfully, yes, everybody is still happy and healthy. Some people did have to take a different role that maybe wasn't their first because it was strategic. At the end of the day, we're all adults. We have bills, we have responsibilities. Sometimes that's the better strategy. That doesn't take away from you as a person or a professional, but they still report that the work we did was meaningful and effective. And
Yeah.
that's what's effective. And You're exactly right, Curtis. Taking control of the interview doesn't mean you're aggressive, doesn't mean you're arrogant or loud or obnoxious or offensive. Quite frankly, you want to know the answer to that question anyway. So it's authentic, which
That's
is
right.
another really important component of my practice. I don't want you to be inauthentic. I don't
Right.
want to give you a script. I
Right.
won't give you a script. And I have clients that say, send me a list of all the possible interview questions. No. First of all, it's
Exactly.
not possible.
Right.
And second of all, that's inauthentic. That doesn't teach you anything. You need to learn the strategy and the structure, which is rooted in curiosity.
Yes.
And then
Part
what
of
happens?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Nope.
No, we're fired up.
No, what I was going to say was part of you asking me questions also tells me or gives me a lens of your preparation. And that tells me how serious you took this. So I'm sorry I was fired up and jumped in there. I just thought there was
No, but you're so right. And that's a great observation, because what I was about to say was something similar, which is what happens to your interviewer subconsciously. The person feels trust the person who seeks to understand, right? You don't
yes.
want to just hear what's on the JD. I mean,
Right.
I worked for a small design shop before their big acquisition. I was at Fjord long ago when we thought we were enormous because we had 250 designers around the world before Accenture acquired them. And I was hired to hire their executive leadership team. And I would get on the phone with candidates and tell them, we are a hot mess. The people who work here are amazing, amazing. You could not love them, but it was a mess. The two founders that I knew very well were very transparent. We're designers. Like, sometimes we forget to bill clients. We don't like to bill people, hate numbers. I don't like any of that. But that's not a way to run a business. The CFO was running around. He was new and he was crazed all the time because we had no money. So I would tell candidates, this is a hot mess, but it's interesting work and interesting challenge. And I had a decent number of candidates tell me, this is going to sound crazy, but that's actually my favorite kind of opportunity. I have no
Yeah.
desire to go be plug and play.
Right. Yep.
And there were people who would say, I can't stand the ambiguity. That's like, it's annoying to me. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Let's get honest from moment go, because I don't need to lose an hour of my life. You don't need to lose an hour of your life. Hello, goodbye.
Yeah.
There's something for everyone.
Yes. Yes. No, I love it. That ambiguity thing. When I'm interviewing folks, I'm looking for, can you work in ambiguity and can you give examples, or do you need a box, right? Because some people just need a
Yeah.
box. They need
Some people
boundaries.
need a box.
Yeah. Yeah. So we spent so much time talking about your clients. One of the things that you mentioned was about the CEOs who are lonely, and it is lonely at the top because people don't understand your day to day. They think you make a lot of money and you don't do anything, but what you are responsible for, how the speed of the decisions that you have to make, the impact on people's lives. You got a board of directors that you have to be beholden to. And then, like you said, your family has no idea what you go through on a day to day basis. And unless
Yeah.
you have good friends and peers that actually help you with that, you do need somebody that you can download all this stuff on. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah.
And also kudos to you for like a lot of what you explained in terms of how you've taken your psychology background, right? And the pivots that you made and understanding that much of what this is just human psychology, right? And then mirroring the right actions. So what I want you to do now is tell me about a person, a client that you helped that it was so impactful to them that it was impactful to you and it changed you as a person. What's that story? Now, you don't have to give me specific names, but it would be good to hear how you became different as a result.
That is such a difficult question. I won't leave you with this, but I do feel like all of my clients have impacted me and make me better. There was a client who had made it might be simplistic, but it always stands out in my mind in terms of realizing the realm of what's possible. He was very successful at a consulting company, a large consulting company, and made a COVID move
Mhm.
to the Midwest, a very small market. Because at a certain point, I think we all thought COVID would not go away.
Right. That's right.
and then was impacted by a layoff and was panicking because he still had his bills hadn't changed and probably invested in some other things that he would not have, but now with his lower cost of living and same comp anyway, now was impacted by a layoff. And his confidence was, so shaken and so low. It was something he had never experienced. He'd never looked for another role. And through a lot of evaluation about, kind of the patterns in his background, we realized although he had always been in creative environments, he really had a strong thread through heavily regulated industries and was embarrassed about that once we realized that because he's like, well, that's boring. That's like banks and healthcare organizations and things like that. But we were able to design a new role for him that was with what's called like a med tech, health tech kind of company, building these connected heart kinds of devices that are cooler and sleeker and more user friendly, that eventually the technology migrated into a neonatal ward.
Hmm.
And as a child, he had been premature, and that technology many years ago saved him. And now he felt like he was able to pay it forward.
Nice. And so how'd
So
that make you feel?
I thought that was an amazing, cycle, paying it forward and just being part of his journey and helping him. He said he never would have thought of himself as somebody talented with this extreme and evident niche in heavily regulated industries and would never want to be pinned that way and actually look at the impact that he created. So that was profound for me to help him uncover that sort of unsuspecting thread. And he was able to use all of his years of experience that dovetailed in that way.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That
Yeah.
is pretty cool. I mean, look, we're in this to help folks, right? So when we do, and we have these great stories, but you know, I know you got a plenty of clients that really, really tout your capabilities and what you do for them. So that's cool. So there was a question that I didn't ask you because I know, as you prepare to come on the show, you're going to talk about vision to reality and things like that. That you'd hope that I'd ask you. And
Mm,
so what I want you to do is say, okay, here's what I hoped you asked me, Curtis, and then give me the answer to it.
okay. I guess I hoped that you would ask me, maybe what is so difficult about doing this role? There is so much joy in it and so much reward. And I really invest time to make sure I do retrospectives and end of engagement kind of surveys to find out what was rewarding. But what is difficult about it is that some people most of my clients still land their role. I have to say the majority, I think I calculated it was something like 94% of all my
That's
clients.
great.
And usually the ones that haven't found it yet, we're still working together. But what is difficult is helping people to overcome those things that maybe held them back in the first place. Sometimes they'll just learn the framework and they can master that, but you know that you just can't always penetrate people's insecurities or deeply rooted, things that they've experienced, over time. I have a client who moved from Africa to New York City and she just experienced so much prejudice over time. She was in fintech, so it's already a male dominated
Hmm.
world. And she just had a lot of things to overcome, a lot of things. And so in many ways, at times I felt like I was putting band-aids on certain situations and trying to help her learn the framework so that at least she could not just try to memorize scripts and things like that. But not everybody will adapt those things. And sometimes that's really hard.
I was going to wrap up with one more one more ending question, but before I do that, I'm going to deviate from my normal schedule. I want to go back to the CEOs that need to download with you, and I want to talk about how there's so much pressure now for them to come up with ways that AI can help their companies be efficient. What are some of their struggles there, right? Because the outside world and maybe even their board of directors are saying, hey, we got to compete. You got to do something about this. And yet,
Yeah.
AI is still emerging as a as something that could literally really replace people because right now there's not a lot of use cases, just a lot of people speculating. What are some of
Mhm.
those conversations like?
It's one of the biggest topics is just the corporate governance.
Hmm.
Who owns what and how do you manage that? And who's on top of it? Who's paying attention to it? Who's who's running all of that? And that is a huge stressor because it's often overlooked. All the
Yeah.
ramifications of, something just running wild. And then what happens if you invest a lot in new AI tools and there's no product adoption? I have a client at a large bank, international bank, and just making sure that all of the money that was invested comes to fruition, has the return on that there is product adoption and that the corporate governance is dealt with correctly. It can be very complicated because a lot of times you have other external forces pushing against you, wanting to change sooner, faster, but it isn't always the best strategy. So it's a lot. And just the level of scrutiny, what you wear, you're constantly being monitored. You cannot make comments on LinkedIn. You have to be careful about everything.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
hard.
I can imagine that it is. So thank you. Thank you for such a wonderful and powerful conversation and sharing all your
Thank you,
insights.
Curtis.
And so before we wrap up, can you tell our listeners how can they connect with you and what do you got special coming up that we can share as well?
So you can always find me on LinkedIn or you can go to my website, jenniferspecial.com. And on the horizon, I'm really trying to add more group format programs. I invest a lot of time in one-on-one format, but I'm trying to develop more group programs and develop groups that act as a force multiplier because I want to have small groups where the people can really learn from each other. The few group programs that I ran last year, it was so rewarding to see how much they leaned on each other.
Yeah.
And so that was very rewarding.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to thank you for being such a great host. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm the host, but I just felt like it took me so long to get you on the show that I'm your guest, right?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Curtis. No, it's my honor. I'm so happy to be here. I appreciate it.
We're going to take all your cool information and we're going to put it in the show notes. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us for another episode of the Vision to Reality podcast. And until next time, keep bringing your visions to life. Thank you. That's a wrap on today's episode of the Vision to Reality podcast. A huge thank you to today's guests. You can find all of their contact information in any resources mentioned in the show notes below. Also, can you do me a big favor? If you found today's conversation valuable, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a comment, and a review, and share it with a friend or colleague who could benefit from the information shared today. And remember, vision without action is just a dream. Let's turn those big ideas into reality. I'll see you in the next episode.